Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are, wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, a creative content writer here in Chesterfield, and I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. Obviously, the calendar is rapidly approaching 2023. I don't know if you're aware. And with that, I guess now has become tradition here on the podcast that we talk about the state of the county as one of our final episodes of the year. And I'm very glad to have County Administrator Dr. Joe Casey here on the show once again. Dr. Casey, how are you?
I'm good, Brad. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I very much appreciate your time. Very much appreciate you coming on to talk about State of the County. Obviously, for folks who haven't been able to see it yet, you can check out our YouTube channel, as well as Chesterfield.gov/State of the County. You can watch the whole thing in its entirety. We're going to kind of borrow... I was a little lazy, not gonna lie. We're gonna borrow a little bit of the structure to talk through some of the things here from State of the County. But if you're interested, feel free to go to those different avenues to watch the whole presentation from Dr. Casey that he did as we recorded this last week. I guess before we get started, Dr. Casey, I want to talk a little bit. This was the 7th one of these that you've done. It caps a very important year for Chesterfield County, and I'm just curious as we go into sort of the ins and outs of the various partnerships, which was a theme for your presentation. I'm just curious as you look back on all of 2022, what stands out to you the most, and was that sense of partnership the kind of clear winner when it came to looking at the year in terms of like trying to figure out the frame by which to sort of present it to folks?
Yes, it's a very good question. And partnerships are the root of Chesterfield. It's the root of the region, quite frankly. We're blessed to be in a region where there's so many nonprofits, so many citizens. If you assign them a homework assignment, they will do it. Yeah. Many citizens do homework without us even assigning it. That makes our life a little easier. So, I've had the experiences over my 30-plus year career, Hanover, Henrico, now Chesterfield, quite frankly, where, these entities, many of them have been around for 50-plus years.
Right.
And what we've tried to do, the pandemic helped force some of that we just needed as many people and parts to make this machine, if you will, of the local government run as efficiently as possibly and still run on the front lines, paying attention to everyone's needs. With that, you need as many eyes and ears out there, and there's no better eyes and ears than a local partner.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you said early in the presentation that really stuck with me as it went through was the idea of sort of being better than we were yesterday. And in all ways, as you go through this, the county experienced growth, whether that's the sense of growth that we think of in terms of more, right? Whether that's growth in terms of progress or whether that's growth in terms of all of the things sort of put together. The first place we're going to start is in economic development. Now, Garrett was just on the show a couple weeks ago, folks. So if you haven't, check out episode 34 of the podcast. He does a great job sort of walking through just sort of the year that it was with Lego, with Plenty, with Civica, with all of the different types of growth, sports tourism and stuff we'll come back to in a little bit. But in general, for you, Dr. Casey, I kind of want to present this as, from your seat as county administrator, how impactful will 2022 be in this story of Chesterfield and economic development for years, decades to come?
Well, just like the word partnership too, Garrett has relied on partners over the years. We have the Greater Richmond Partnership. Right. We have state officials with Virginia Economic Development Partnership. Governor Youngkin himself came here many times, and anytime a governor's coming here
it's good news.
To cut a ribbon or stick a shovel in the dirt,
absolutely,
is a good day for the people of Chesterfield County, quite frankly, the people of the region.
Yeah.
Garrett also has built a great team. He'll be the first to say, he's not alone in what he does.
For sure.
So he's able to divide and conquer and put people out there on the front lines and negotiate good deals. All we have done is create a nice canvas with beautiful paint and a beautiful picture, thanks to the people and partnerships you've referenced to make this a sellable commodity.
Right. I mean, Lego in and of itself, I would imagine there are lots of folks in seats like yours throughout this nation who would love to have said, Lego's coming to our backyard. And I can imagine, too, when you have something like Upper Mag, this sort of jewel in terms of the eyes of the state, in terms of economic development folks. As we look to 2023, how excited are you about the potential, not just to see these projects start to come online, but also the possibilities of what's ahead?
I'm really excited. And, whenever local government gets involved in dirt and trying to own dirt and manage it and zone it and get the infrastructure there, there's a risk because that's a business decision, if you will. And government is not necessarily wired to be business 24/7. So Meadowville Technology Park was a business venture of Chesterfield County a generation ago. So to see it come to fruition, to see it give the return on the investment that those before me had hoped would occur. And capping it off with a Lego and then Plenty, the world's largest indoor farm, and Civica, one of the highest tech pharmaceutical labs to be done. As we basically have consumed all that dirt, yields, quite frankly, a good business decision now in the past tense.
Yep.
And so Upper Magnolia is a future tense, present tense statement. And we've learned lessons at Meadowville. And we're going to apply them at Upper Magnolia.
Yeah.
So again, we don't venture all over the place because we respect private property owners doing what they need to do.
Right.
But once in a while, projects like this, and we've been told by the private sector, thank you for doing this because it creates an ancillary local economy that benefits their private property.
Right. In terms of good business decisions, partnering with sports tourism, obviously that's a huge boon for the county, a huge opportunity for Chesterfield. And in terms of, I think 63 events, up 30% this year. That was also one of the sort of tentpole portions of the state of the county. In terms of sports tourism, what really stands out to you about what the work that Chesterfield has done, and also the possibilities they're going forward when it comes to bringing people in and allowing sort of their tax dollars to flow to the county, their tax revenue to flow to the county without services needing to be rendered for them? That seems to be a real win-win for Chesterfield in a lot of different ways.
Again, that's a business venture that Chesterfield did. In 2016, 2017, when I first got here, we would rent it, if you will, River City Sportsplex. And it's tough when you're the tenant to go full force and leverage its property. The gates of River City, people may not remember, but they were closed often when it was not a tournament or for the little bit of time that we had it for public use.
Right.
It is a community park, regional park, a destination park for sports tourism. So that place is a vibrant attraction.
Right.
Vibrancy by default creates, again, local impacts, whether it's hotels, restaurants. More importantly, it's seeing people who have come here from afar, sometimes foreign countries, to see the quality of life. It's as they're driving away, saying that this looks like a community I could live in.
Right.
Looks like a community I could work in, community I can invest in.
Right.
Those are the things that are hard to track as a variable, but we know that they are occurring.
Yeah. You mentioned living, and obviously as we talk about sort of, I had Dan Cohen on the podcast recently to talk about the idea of the ways that the county can impact affordable housing and what can be done to sort of help to not necessarily jumpstart it, but to help it flourish. And one of the things, Ettrick Landing, a huge development, so to speak, in terms of the things that happened in 2022 for Chesterfield. As you look at that partnership there, what stands out to you about housing and the partnerships that have allowed for Chesterfield to make that such a priority going into 2023?
Well, again, it's an old school site. And so when government owns property, you can just simply sell it and turn your head and hope that what someone buys it for a good price and does a good thing. But, this is where we were intentional. We own the land. We didn't have to sell it for the highest price. We were approached and thought through. A nonprofit could come in there and not just do what they needed to do to create an affordable product, a unique product, a little neighborhood for the first time for this land trust, but doing so with the support of the community around them, going slowly but surely and designing it, listening, design the homes. So it really becomes the fabric of that community. And, it goes without saying, we need that affordable housing for the workers, for the jobs, for many of the things that, are the hospitality industries.
Yeah.
Every company has a whole spectrum of workers, and it needs sometimes that entry-level worker, that lower-paid worker, to be part of the company's success.
Yeah. And in terms of, you just mentioned success, which is a perfect segue too. In terms of I've heard you speak, numerous times about sort of the job that the Chesterfield as a government in terms of serving the residents of the county, and the idea of not just partnerships and the different departments and things coming together, but then also the sort of service, right, that is provided. And in terms of human services, opioid abatement and medical opportunity and making sure that people have those types of services, it seems like one of the most, bedrock sort of functions of county government is to make sure that people have what they need. And certainly as we look back on 2022, those partnerships were critical and will continue to be critical in terms of making those services available to folks. And I'm just curious, as you look back on the human services aspect of 2022, and certainly that was a portion of the state of the county as well, what stood out to you the most about sort of the work that was done in that arena as well?
Well, a few things. One is, the greatest compliment you can get as a local government official is, I didn't realize that service had your fingerprints on it. They just think that it felt like a good private service or a nonprofit service was being provided, a professional service. And part of that is a lot of the partnerships, we have the accountability with them. So if we're a financing partner or provide facilities or space or the process and path for them to have people knock on the door needing a service, again, we have a role in it, but we can help frame it so that service quality is there for each and every person that's utilizing it. Having said that, we have many services ourselves that we offer directly 24/7 in many cases where, again, we treat everyone who lives in Chesterfield County as a customer. The customer is at the top of the org chart for Chesterfield County. I try and remind every new employee that I meet as part of orientation that we work for the citizens of Chesterfield County.
I remember that very clearly.
I'm glad you were paying attention.
I was. And in terms of, just to that point, right, we're going to get into, partnering on public education, partnering on public safety, partnering on infrastructure. And I don't know if any three sections could have been more perfectly suited for the bond referendum, which passed, exceedingly high marks in November. And in terms of each one of these sort of sections, whether it's the schools that will be replaced or expanded because of the bond referendum, whether it's the fire stations and the police stations that are going to be made available because of the bond referendum, or just in terms of general infrastructure in general, I think this is the perfect place to talk about the bond referendum. How important do you feel like its passage and its overwhelming success and the way that voters overwhelmingly supported it? How important do you feel like that is for Chesterfield?
It's generational, because what we're going to be doing today over the next 5 to 10 years and investing, one of the largest investments ever in the state of Virginia on a single day, single question, in essence, it rivals sometimes the state bond referendum questions. The largest investment ever in the central Virginia area on one day of what the people say, we're good. Go forth and do it. I've already gotten calls when you're starting all of the projects, but so just give us a little bit of time to get that going. But what we're doing is we are mindful of our house, and if you think about it, 20 plus years ago, we had many other projects that we were doing in Chesterfield County. We in essence paid them off, just like people pay off their own mortgage. So we had that capacity, and what we're doing as what I think is a smart business and fiscal move is reinvesting, if you will, our mortgage payment back into the next generation of assets to serve the people. And having 76% of the people, not necessarily understanding, some of them, the entire legalities of the question. It's a hard question to answer if you don't really know much. We done as much as possible through podcasts, through social media, and other sources. But, a lot of people went into that ballot box that day not knowing much about the question, but what they did know is that the value of a teacher, a police officer, Parks and Rec groundskeeper, a librarian, those are the services then are going to be housed by these assets. And I like to think, and I know just from talking to people, that it's their value and trust in those frontline workers that said, we're going to give you a bigger, better home.
You mentioned teachers. Let's talk about education. So we're going to replace A.M. Davis. We're going to replace Bensley. We got a new elementary school and high school in the Western 360 area. We're going to replace Grange Hall. There's a host of sort of now projects that will start to come to fruition because the bond referendum passed. I think the thing that has been especially interesting is to watch sort of the continued relationship between the schools and the county. There are lots of different services which are shared, which is sort of different right here than it is in a lot of different places. And I think that we really, benefit from those sharing of services. We really benefit from the way that the two groups really work together. And, your theme of partnership could not have been more apt. And, when it comes to education, being able to not just take care of the house, so to speak, right, the building itself, but then also to take care of the teachers, of the employees of the school system. In terms of looking back at 2022 and that partnership, how critical do you feel like it is between the county and schools?
Well, it's all about communication, and it's all about honesty and transparency with one another. So, it starts with the superintendent and myself, but it also starts with the board members and their respective school board members. by district or chair vice chairs to their chair vice chair. Our senior leadership teams on both sides all have pathways, all have each other's cell phone number, and we have numerous conversations. So if we see something, we say something earlier. We don't want to read about it. We don't want it to kind of get away from us if we haven't defined it together.
Right.
And I like to think that, again, when I came here in 2016, and it was Dr. Lane on the school board side, that prior referendum that we were still building out had the rehab of many schools, to renovate an existing old school. And we realized just for a nominal amount, really for the long run, we could build new schools instead of rehabbing them, with all the safety designs, the bus loops and things of that nature.
Right.
So, it started 6+ years ago. It's continued now with Dr. Doherty and myself,
right,
that we've come out of the box and realized we're graduating 5,000 plus students per year.
Right.
I want those 5,000 to feel like they could come live here, work here,
right,
and enjoy here. And there's no better way to do that than to give them a good 13 years.
And then, of course, on the public safety side, right, again, bedrock service provided by the county. Public safety is, if you look at the things that are, absolute non-negotiables, that has to be one of them. Jailhouse Redemption was certainly a huge opportunity for Chesterfield to sort of put part of its story out into the actual real world, beyond the borders of the Commonwealth, beyond even the borders of these United States. And then obviously a lot of continued partnerships between the different groups and the different organizations. And as you look back on public safety and the partnerships there, how critical are those as we look forward to 2023?
Well, to give some context and the value of a partnership, and again, our interest in not just today, but tomorrow, you referred to the Jailhouse Redemption, and that's the addiction recovery program that's in our jail. Tremendous peer-to-peer support counseling. In essence, the people who are in there are developing skills themselves that are employable later on. We ourselves have actually hired back a graduate of that program to do nothing more than be a professional peer support counselor because he earned it.
Right. He
was featured in the miniseries, so that helped his resume a little bit. But what I have now seen is there's an alumni club of that. There's an alumni nonprofit that has these people get together and talk. Many of them are going to need that peer-to-peer support counseling the rest of their lives.
Right.
And I've gone to their meetings just as a guest speaker, but more as a guest cheerleader, and just saying thank you. It's the most honest group of people you will ever meet, and I'm humbled just to be amongst them.
Yeah, and in terms of when we talk about sort of those bedrock functions, right? There's a part about education, there's public safety, infrastructure, obviously a huge piece of it. If we talk about CVTA and Mr. Carroll doesn't pop out of the woodwork here, I'm not sure how that's possible, but because it's such a thing that's near and dear to him, he works real hard on that. But in terms of just a greater overall picture, you've got Fall Line Trail, you've got CVTA, the Otterdale Road widening. There's lots of things that happen from an infrastructure standpoint that really did, as you look back on it, and set things well going forward. Certainly, as we talk about Upper Mag and some of the possibilities from that have a big impact on infrastructure. Where do you think the county is right now from an infrastructure standpoint, and how do you see things sort of going forward into 2023?
Well, I think I've said it on this show before. We've been behind on roads since 1611. I've even seen in 1917 when they were building the historic courthouse. Yeah. Actually, it was just called the new courthouse then. Yeah. There was a petition not to build it because we needed to spend the $17,000 on roads. Yeah. And that's when we had horses still pretty much. So we will always lag, to a certain degree. And any infrastructure of government needs the base of the people to pay for tomorrow's assets. Right. Otherwise, I have to charge yesterday's people twice as much. Right. And it is simple math, but it gets complex real quickly. Right. What the CVTA has done, though, it's enabling us to define a problem that previously – a problem today, we would put through state plans and other funding traditional mechanisms and say, okay, that's about 10 to 20 years away. Now, we were able to say that's 0 to 5 years away. And, the larger it is, the more partners we need. We do need the depth and breadth of the state and federal government, really to get the POIT extended to Hull Street as a signature project. But other than that, many of these other projects we're doing, infrastructure, road, even utilities. Yeah. The means and manners are there and the engines are there to get them done and done wisely. Yeah.
Now, we can talk about partnerships between, different organizations and stuff, but I think the one, again, to to reference that sort of bedrock, non-negotiable, is the partnership between the county government and its citizens, its residents. And there's no greater place, I think, that it really exemplifies the partnership that exists than when we talk about sort of the high quality sort of return on the investment that the residents receive versus the low cost that they are having to pay. And one of the things that was really shocking, if I'm being honest, is that portion of the state of the county where you kind of break down that per capita cost and how much sort of cheaper it is for a resident of Chesterfield for what they get versus a lot of other localities versus other counties in Virginia and just the average in Virginia. And I'm sure that because, you sort of have your thumb on the pulse of that, so to speak. But even when you look at those numbers, do they surprise even you to see how efficient the thing can run and how good, how well run, how well oiled the machine really is right now in terms of making sure that folks get more than what they pay for and they continue to pay less for it?
Sure. Initially when we were designing presentations, sometimes you want to start out with the money.
Yeah.
And, and I was like, it's going to make us look cheap. And then you have the sort of that in the background. Yeah. So the substance of the presentation, after 45 minutes or however long it was, it's just like, wow, they are doing so much. And then
also,
for so little cost.
Right.
And that was the closure to it. But the bottom line is we leverage every dollar as best we can. So whether it's something that we're spending directly or incentivizing a partnership, incentivizing a private sector development that's going to give us a subsequent return later on, it's a lot of dials and wheels. But, the best part is volunteer is the word volunteer means free. That's the definition. Once we start paying for volunteers, then it's not free.
Yeah, absolutely.
It becomes like an employer-employee relationship. But, whether it's a group of people or a singular person, our Government Citizens Academy that I promote each year is really the training grounds for our future volunteers. And we're finally, on the topic of volunteers, we're recognizing them with a whole walk of fame now. So, it's not just a certificate. It's not just a thank you maybe once a year.
Right.
There's a permanency to it.
Right.
And we've talked before about our Chesterfield Remembers at the library.
Yep.
I mean, I want to hear as many volunteer stories recorded because that's what's going to incentivize the next generation to get up and help out their community and make a difference.
Yeah.
They own the community.
Right. And in terms of, that community, last question, as we look into 2023, there's a lot of different, factors in place when it comes to taxes and relief and sort of the strategies that the county will employ to sort of, you guys have talked about levers, right? You sort of move the different levers to sort of do what needs to be done. As we look to 2023, how important do you feel like that sort of tax relief story is, and how does it sort of help to frame what will be, budget season here very soon?
Nobody likes the word tax. I don't like it, and I work for a local government. I don't like doing my federal tax returns and just seeing where all that money went with almost no accountability. But that's a whole nother podcast
or series.
but what I try and do and tell people is, under the Code of Virginia, the flexibility we have to collect monies are limited.
Right.
So we just have to think broad and leverage the Code of Virginia to the taxpayer's benefit.
Right.
And that benefit is if you're elderly or disabled, there's programs that we can do. If your car is aging out, there's programs that we can do. But there aren't that many. But having said that, the big kahuna of the real estate property tax rate, we're driving it down. It was 96 cents when I got here in 2016 through good fortune of the economy, good leadership of the Board of Supervisors, and being diligent about how we spend our money. We are now maximizing the public hearing tax rate to be 91 cents this next spring. And that's where we're starting.
Right.
So we keep pushing that down. Doesn't mean people aren't paying taxes. Doesn't mean some people aren't paying more taxes.
Right.
But I just want them to know that we're being mindful of it as best we can.
Yeah. Well, folks, if you haven't had a chance to, like I said, check out the whole State of the County address. It's on our website, Chesterfield.gov/State of the County. You can also watch it on our YouTube channel. It's much like the podcast. It's kind of everywhere. But Dr. Casey, thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad. Cue up that music.
It's apparently one of your favorites. All right. Now make sure you can check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA, and on Instagram, it's Chesterfield, Virginia, all one word. And on Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Make sure to like that page so you can keep us as we go into 2023. Now, let me tell you all the ways you can check us out. You can watch us on our YouTube channel, as well as on our website, Chesterfield.gov/podcast. An audio-only version of the show is available there, as well as on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, and a whole host of other services. And if you're so inclined to give us a rating or review, we appreciate it. You can also watch the podcast on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7, on the weekends at noon. That's Comcast Channel 98 and Verizon Channel 28. And lastly, you can check out Chesterfield.gov/connect with us for an opportunity for you to get in touch with us and us to get in touch with you. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, my executive producer, Teresa, Bonifas, and all the good folks here in Communications Media for making this possible. My thanks to you for joining us today. So, from all of us here in Chesterfield, thank you very much for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care.